this is your Wednesday video. It's always a mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get on Wednesday. But today we have our first scrap slash stash busting quilt project for 2025. Number 1. So I say scrap slash stash because we're going to use a little bit of both in this project. And we are going to make this block right here. And we're going to put them side by side into a quilt. Super easy. Let me talk a little bit about the pattern. First of all, I went to Pinterest for inspiration, and I was browsing around one day and I saw this beautiful quilt that was made something like this, and it was using denim for these center squares. There was no information about sizes of the blocks of the pieces. There was no designer name. It was just a photo. So I looked at it and I thought, I can do that. So I just had to make up some numbers, some measurements for each of these pieces. So we have 2 basic measurements. Our center square here, and this will be a common square throughout all of our blocks, is 6.5 inches. 6.5 inches square. These scrappy squares are 2.5 inches. Now some of you have seen me make a lot of projects out of 2.5 inch squares. I have my 16 patches that I do, which is basically just every other scrappy square is a common fabric. So this is very similar, but it's going to be a little bit quicker than that all 2.5 inch square quilt that I make. And I'm continuing to make those, by the way. Anyway, this is an easy block. Anyone can do this block, and you have the materials in your possession to do it right now. You can make it any size you want. The block finished, well, finished to this point is 10.5 inches. So once it's sewn in, it's 10 inches. That means the math is super easy to decide what size you want. If you want a 50 by 60 quilt, you need 5 blocks across by 6 blocks down. If you want a 70 by 90 quilt, you need 7 blocks across and 9 blocks down. Alright, so this little area right here, you can get 30 blocks out of a yard, 30 of these squares out of a yard. That will make a 50 by 60 quilt. You can use less than that and make a table mat, or a table topper, or a table runner, or a wall hanging, or any other smaller type of project. You only just need to find 6.5 inch squares and some 2.5 inch squares. So I didn't want to use denim because, one, I don't have any denim. I didn't want to source denim, and I don't know, I just didn't want to do it. So I have this fabric here, which is a Riley Blake. I don't remember what it's called, but it kind of has a grunge look to it. But it's not grunge. It doesn't have any texture to it at all. I have bought a bolt of it, and I've just been slowly using off of that. And I like how it has kind of the denim-y look to it. So I'm accomplishing that quilt that I was attracted to without using denim. Plus, you know, using denim, you know, you have to use a different needle, things of that sort. So this is easier, and it's more adaptable just to use regular cotton. You can use batiks, you can use any of your quilting cottons that you have, you can use wovens, whatever it is that you have will go into this. Alright, so let's go over onto the cutting table over there, and I'll show you some options for this block right here, as well as how can you get your hands on a bunch of these little 2.5 inch squares. So let's talk just a little bit about the 2.5 inch squares. As I showed you, I have a supply always because I make continuous projects out of 2.5 inch squares. So I have no lack of 2.5 inch squares. I always have them. Anytime I finish a project, for example, I just used this on the back of a rag quilt. Now I have scraps. I cut them into different sizes, one of which is the 2.5 inch size. If you don't have this, you can make this. We cut up fabric all the time. Do you have a bin of 2.5-inch strips? Jelly roll strips. For example, here's a great big jelly roll leftover bunch that I have. And I think you can get two blocks out of a strip. Now the challenge with this is going to be having enough variety. Now if you've got if you have a big bin like I have here, you know, I could go through these and cut and get a whole nother box of these probably. So if you have something like this, then just cut up your 2.5-inch strips and you will have the variety that you need. That's one thing you can do. Do you have fat quarters? This is a good variety here. These are all fat quarters. I think there's a few half yards in here too. I have 6 bins. I have 6 of these. So I could go through, you can get 48 squares out of one fat quarter. So you can pick yourself out how many ever fat quarters you need for the amount of blocks that you want. 16 2.5-inch squares per block. So you can get approximately, you can get 3 blocks worth of 2.5-inch squares out of one fat quarter. So if you had a big variety and you cut all those up into 2.5-inch squares, you're going to have what you need to make these scrappy blocks. And then there's always yardage from your stash. If you have yardage in your stash and you've got some 1 yards and they've been sitting there for a long time, let's cut them up. Cut 2, 3, 4 strips off of each one of those. Let's say cut them down to half yards and just use a half yard of each, and you'll still have a half yard left of that print in case you want it for something else. So if you've got stash, if you've got scraps, you can make this. Alright, let's talk about our fabric for our bigger square here. I'll explain to you what I was using. I happen to have quite a bit of this and I'm using off of it, and it gave me that jeansy denim look that I was wanting. But you could go some other directions with this. I would go dark or light, one of the two. Any sort of medium tone fabric or a real high volume, lots of stuff going on in there, and just a medium tone color is not going to show up very much. You could, though, use a feature block. Let's say, for example, you have some big K-facet flowers that you could fussy cut for these, but you're going to have a lot of them if you want them all to be the same. Or if you have some other fabric that has a bigger sort of feature design on it that you could cut out of, and you have enough yardage for it, you could definitely do that. Aside from that, dark or light. I have pulled some of my grunge that I have on hand. Grunge would be fantastic in any color, just about any color. There again, light or more dark shaded. This one is kind of on it's kind of iffy. I think it would work pretty good with the scraps that I tend to have, but if you have a lot of medium to dark scraps, I don't know if that would show up very much. This one would be good for a wide variety, and that almost has the denim look to it too. And then also here's a light dot grunge that would look good if you wanted to go that route. So that is some options out of grunge. If you have a yard or two of that, depending on what size quilt you're making, a couple yards, about 2.5 yards will make just about any bed-size quilt, I think. Another direction you could go is with a black and white print. This happens to be a word print. I think that would look cool. I really like that. You could mix these up. Similar black and white prints, you could mix those in your blocks. You know, I could use all 3 of these. and that would be okay. Gives a whole different look. I'm one of these people that I don't like to cut dots, like to piece, like to do half square triangles, because it creates this really odd shaped dot that is cut and matched together unevenly. I just do not like that at all. This would be a good option for something like this because you're not cutting it. So if you have any dot material, that would work. And bigger dots than this too would be really cool. So those are some options for you. If you don't have something like what I have here, just go look and look for a dark or a light, a black and white combination, a big dot, something like that would look really good in these squares. Okay, let's get started. Here's our 10.5-inch finished block, mocked up and colored pencils here, so you can kind of get a good idea of how things are going to go together. You need your one 6.5-inch block and then 16 2.5-inch blocks. And I pick my blocks very randomly. I try not to think about it too much. So the first thing we want to do out of our 16 blocks is make sure that we don't have any that are directional. That doesn't mean we're not going to use the directional ones. We're just going to pull out 4 directional ones. That one's directional. See that? I wouldn't want my bees going down. That's just me. Or sideways. May not matter to you, but it does to me. Here's another one that I think this actually went sideways in the actual grand scheme of things for this fabric. I don't know. I'm going to keep that one out. That one might give me issues. So we need to pick out 4 that are potentially directional. And if we don't have 4, we can just pull an odd one out. But you always need to pull 4 out. These are going to be added to your block in the end. So now what we can do is just put together pairs. And as I'm looking at my squares here, I am probably going to be picking lights and darks or mediums and darks to put together. Like these two probably could go together. This one could go together. This black and red looks good. What do I have left here? This. Maybe this. And this. Something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and sew all of these together in pairs. And I have my stitch length set at 1.8 on my Brother machine, but I do backstitch. If you want to make it a faster process, just stick them in there and fly all the way through chain stitching, and you don't have to backstitch like I do. But that's just what I like to do. I like those seams to be locked on both ends. And I would use just barely a scant, not a heavy scant 1/4 inch, but just go right under the edge of that foot and nothing sticking out. If you have the seam tape on the bed of your sewing machine, you're going to sew to the inside left of the outermost black line. So you're going to see that entire black line as you're sewing your seam. I know you can't really see that. Hold on. Here's the seam tape. There's a black line here, a red line, and a black line. So this black line right here, I have this red line matched up exactly to my needle. So what I mean by scant 1/4 inch is not only are you going just a tiny bit to the left underneath your foot, but you're also seeing that entire right hand black line as you sew. And that makes them come out perfect. one more left to do. And then now I'm just going to cut them apart. And I'm also going to finger press them. If you don't want to use your fingernails for that, use a seam roller or some other type of thing with a flat edge to get those to stay open. I just give them a really firm rub down with my fingernail, and that opens them up nicely. Okay, one more. And now we're going to pick two of these pairs, and one will be the top and one will be the bottom. So we need a pair plus one to make it fit. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my directional ones and put it here, and we'll call this our bottom row. And then our top row, let's see, let's do this, and then maybe this one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew those, and you can mark these as well. You can put a little tag on there that says B for bottom, and then on that one T for top. I'm going to go ahead and chain piece these, chain stitch. And I'm going to go ahead also and put these pairs together like this, because these will be our sides. So I think I'll turn that one like that, just to kind of get a good mess of color. Okay, so we have our top, our bottom, and the beginnings of our two sides. So let me go ahead and clip those apart. So I'm going to go ahead and finger press this open, and finger press this one open. And there's our top and bottom. Right now you could go ahead and sew those on, but I like to go ahead and just kind of test fit these. Test fit as in do the colors fit together right. Let's see what I got here. So I have two more pieces I need to use. I need to add one piece to each one of these rows of 4. Pressing these seams open. So I think I'll put this one here and maybe this one here. Reason being is that's similar to this, and I think it would look better up there. So let's do that. So we can do some chain piecing right now. Let's go ahead and do these. And then we can get one of these on before we have to break our thread. Okay, so let's cut these apart and see if we can remember where they go. Now this is going to be pressed towards the big square, but we'll get to that in a minute. So this can go on, and then I'm going to press these open. Go ahead and have your iron ready though, because we are going to use the iron here shortly. There we go. So now we're really seeing the beginnings of our block. So let's go ahead and put this one on. We have to, because you can't put these on first. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press these two seams toward the big square. I'm just going to press along here and then push my iron this way. Okay, so what's left to do? Put our sides on, and we have ourselves a block. So all's left to do is press in these seams back here. I also am going to press those towards my center square. Alright, there is our first block. So very cute. Let's put some blocks together. After you get some made, you can do this too. But let's go ahead and put 3 more together with this one to make a giant 4-patch. Okay, so now I currently have 3 giant 4 square blocks. Here's one, and then these will all be set next to each other. And another one. Love these blocks. And I'm showing them to you right side up. There are some pieces that have writing on them or animals on them, and I got all of those right side up. So I am ready to put a few more of these together. Once I get 4, I can put 4 of these together and just continue. Isn't this so darling? You can make it any size you want. You could stop right here and make a nice little table square. You could add some 2.5-inch strips all the way around so that you have that double line of 2.5 all the way around, and that would be really cute as a table mat. And maybe use your center square fabric as a binding. You could put 3 of these in a row, 4 of these in a row, however long you need for a table runner, or you can just keep adding until you have a king-size quilt. So this is our #1 scrap stash busting project for 2025. Let's get busy. Let's go rifling around in our bins and in our fabric and make one of these cute little easy and fun quilts. Alright, we will see you next time with something else on Wednesday, and definitely more scrap stash busting projects for 2025. Have fun with this, and I'll see you soon.